sound. Hindi ko sinabing gwapo.
I object. We object.
Ay, sige po, Congressman. I object. Congressman Golez.
Thank you very
Tanong
much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My questions are really along the same line with the ones I prepared as the ones asked by our colleague from Batangas. But first, let me open by saying that per latest computation, the cost per kilowatt hour in the Philippines is something like 18.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And because of this, we beat Japan already as the highest in Asia. Japan is about 17.9 cents per kilowatt hour. So that is the latest. I don't know what is the latest per DOE. That is my latest. Now, the other question I have is this, on the IPP. I remember, Madam Chair, in the last Congress, I think in the early part of this Congress, we discussed with the DOE the matter of the IPP, and we made some rough computations that in the previous payments we made to the IPPs, if we base it on regular price, because that is a little bit high, if we accumulate all of this, this would amount to something like $10 billion already. Paying extra because of the emergency nature over the life of the IPP that, if I'm not mistaken, started in the early 90s. Kailan nag-start ang IPP? Yeah, early 90s. And they've been around for more than 10 years already. And will be around for how many more years? How many more years will the IPPs be around under the contract?
Madam,
Yes, Mr. Florent.
What's the answer?
Madam Chair, up to 2030.
2030. So, yeah, so 20, yeah, and again, based on that computation, the government, the country, will again dish out an additional at least $10 billion to pay a premium for the IPPs compared to how it would be if we are talking of conventional power sources that is not emergency in nature. And $10 billion, if we go by the price or the cost of a coal-fired plant, would translate to about 10,000 megawatts. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
So about, Madam Chair, that would be about 10 handsomely sized power plants that, if we can construct, would be enough to take care of the energy requirements of the entire country, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and more than that, much more than that. How much is the total capacity of all our power plants right now? Is it still about 25,000? 16,000, so even less. In other words, it can almost double the power plant capacity of the country. And in that discussion, Madam Chair, we asked, can we not renegotiate this? Because I go along with the statement of Congressman Mandanas that in the considered opinion of this representation, all these investments by the foreign IPPs have been fully recovered, and more than that, they have already exceeded the rate of return that would be normally accepted by the ERC. So, is that correct? So what is now the status? Because if we are going to focus on renegotiation, that can go a long way in really reversing this power trend in the Philippines, because there was a study also by a Meralco consultant that shows that a lot of this high cost of electricity in the country is because of generation cost. Primarily, because of the IPPs. Is this correct, Mr. Florendo?
Madam Chair, that's correct.
So that's correct. So all this, that if we can get out of this bind as far as the IPPs are concerned, we can already generate cash equivalent to 10 well-sized power plants. That's one. That is the burden. If we translate that in concrete terms, that is the burden that we are shouldering because of the obligation that we do not want to renegotiate, but which I think we can renegotiate. What is the position? Since you are the long-term debt specialist, we all know that long-term debts are always subject to restructuring and renegotiation. Is there any possibility? Have you explored this?
Madam Chair, the Honorable Golez is correct. If PISALM is able to open up renegotiations with the IPP, that would definitely reduce burden for PISALM, NAPOCOR, and the consumers and free up quite a bit of cash. But again, Madam Chair, we have studied the possibility of renegotiating, at least at the technical level. And there are two things that we found out. In some of the contracts, there are buyout provisions, wherein...
Yeah, we also explored that. That is one possibility, to pre-terminate all of this by buying all these future debts, which is again normal in financial restructuring.
That's correct, Madam Chair. However, what is unique in the contracts entered into is that the discount rate to be used to determine the present value of all of these obligations is what the contracts refer to as the CIRR rate, which is equivalent to approximately 2 or 3%.
Which is very low.
Which is very low, Madam Chair.
But that is not cast on stone, is it?
Madam Chair, that is what is in the contract with the IPP, that if we are going to buy out the said contract, that the discount rate to be used will be the CIRR rate.
Yeah, but then, as I said, that is very low. The normal would be something like 12%. And if we use the 12% discount rate, that is going to reduce very dramatically the present value of all these obligations. But that is your role. You are the LTD man of PISAM. Instead of this, which is an acceptance of very onerous and burdensome terms, I think the PISAM should explore financial restructuring. In spite of the contract, we all know that even if there's a contract, everything can be subject to restructuring. I think we have the leverage here. Don't we have the leverage?
Madam Chair, I believe we would have moral suasion.
Yes.
But,
to me, that is the... In fact, Madam Chair, if this committee will, for example, and this is supported by the entire House of Representatives, if this committee will express its sense to direct the PISAM and the Department of Energy to restructure, to renegotiate these IPP terms, this is going to be a major contribution of this committee, more than anything else. I mentioned already that this by itself is already equivalent to so many power plants, if we translate it in concrete terms. This is not just one power plant, but roughly about 10 good-sized power plants. And this was confirmed already by PISAM, Madam Chair.
May I ask Mr. Congressman Golez, excuse me, may I ask when these contracts were perfected? And were these contracts made?
94, 95.
Madam Chair, these contracts were entered into during the time when we had the power crisis in the 90s.
But were they supposed to be renegotiated when IPPs was enacted? That was my understanding. Shouldn't they have been renegotiated? upon the enactment of the PIRA, so that was not done?
Madam Chair, there were renegotiations undertaken already, and I believe, Madam Chair, that the report is already submitted to the NEDA ICC.
Madam Chair,
So when they were renegotiated, these discounted rates were retained? Is that what you're telling us right now? These rates, they were retained? Is that what you're telling us now?
Madam Chair, the provisions for the buyout were not changed. What was changed, I believe, Madam Chair, are certain provisions in terms of costing or the amounts that government is to pay the IPP, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, in view of all these revelations confirmed by PISAM, Madam Chair, I would like to move that this committee ask PISAM to again start the renegotiation on two aspects. One is the discount rate. Instead of 2 or 3%, have it higher. The more traditional would be 12% or 1% per month.
I'd like to second that motion.
So are there any objections to the motion that we file a resolution directing PISAM that these IPP contracts be renegotiated?
And consider the buyout option, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I have no objection, but I still would like to hear from PISAM
Yes.
what the effects would be of renegotiations
Now,
or
my next question is along that line already. I would like to ask PISAM.
sorry, Chairman. Esteemed
I
colleague, I would just,
continue my...
I just add something, which I asked earlier. And also, if we do away altogether with universal charge, what exactly is going to be the scenario? That's all, which was not answered earlier. Thank you.
Now,
Before we finally resolve vote on the resolution presented by Congressman Golez. Congressman Golez, if you can finish your questions, and may we now ask Isam also to respond to the questions of Congresswoman Kimi Tuwangkuli.
Yung final ko na lang, Madam Chair.
What are the implications and what would be the impact of these particular moves?
In fact, these are all related because if we do away with this, then we also do away with the universal charges. In effect, that is going to be the consequence. My next question is, how much in cost per kilowatt hour is the charge of the IPP? And then I'm amazed that the Department of Energy and the PISAM have not computed how much the IPPs have already generated by way of profits. Because I'm sure they can simulate, they would know what would be the price, the cost of the power plants of the IPPs, and then how much they've been making, the operating costs, etc., etc. I think they can make an approximation of how much profits they have generated over the years. As I said earlier, in previous computations, we were looking at an extra revenue of about $10 billion in the past 10 years, and maybe about another $10 billion in the next 10 years of the life of the IPPs.
Aina, you wanted to say something?
The Department of Energy actually keeps track of the kilowatt-hour sales of each IPP because we have what we call a 1-94 fund, wherein 1 centavo for each kilowatt-hour of sale is put into that fund. However, as for the financials of the company, well, most of them are publicly listed and they do submit to the SEC their respective financials. We don't go into the financial status of the IPPs once they're already operating, but when they do apply for the respective business, what do you call this, endorsements from the Department of Energy. We do require that.
Yes, because I think it's incumbent upon the Department of Energy to determine the reasonableness of the rates. Right now, I think the position is that the rates are not reasonable, and we have to quantify this. I think even without an exact quantification, we know already that it is not reasonable, and that is the basis for saying that in the past we overpaid about $10 billion, the IPPs, and we are going to overpay the IPPs another $10 billion if we continue with the contract. And again, I'd like to reiterate that is equivalent to 10 big power plants, enough to take care of the power needs of the country. Instead of that money going to the profits of the IPP, a restructuring and a renegotiation will save us from all this additional burden. May I know, Madam Chair, whether the resolution, my motion was approved?
Yes, I seconded.
I just mentioned earlier, with respect to the motion, may we just hear the answers of Pisang to the questions of Congresswoman Kimi Kawango before we finally resolve what is the pleasure of this committee with regards to your resolution.
Just, Madam Chair.
Congressman Golez.
Madam Chair, just for them to be able to respond properly, I would just like to point out that while my resolution is compatible and definitely go together with that of the Honorable Congressman Golez to renegotiate, my resolution is really to discontinue the current practice of passing on universal charge to the consumer so that we would lessen the burden of our people with regard to lessen their burden, because we have the highest power charge in the nation. I don't know what it was, but at least it was confirmed in Asia. But the whole idea is, so mine is very compatible, but it's a separate motion. And now Congresswoman Kimi would want them to, if I'm not mistaken, to react.
Congressman Batanas, these are two different resolutions.
Two different resolutions.
Yes. One is a resolution and one requires an amendment of law. So, Pisang, please, can you please address the questions of Congresswoman Kimi Kawango? What is the impact? What would be the effect? What are we looking at in the future? First, if we renegotiate these loans. Second, if we remove universal charges. Maybe also ask Yusek Aina to address the questions being posed by the good Congresswoman.
Ma'am, before perhaps Pisang can give the actual figures that would be involved here, we just like to note that the universal charge was put as a mechanism in the EPIRA to be able to address the issue on the debts that would be left by the sale of the assets, considering that the sale would not in fact be able to cover the entire cost, including whatever debts that NPC and PSAM would have in the future in terms of the operations of the remaining plants. So yes, it does in fact add a burden to the consumers, because then the debt is passed on to them. However, in place of that, we would still have to think about and we'd still have to address the fact that there is a debt that needs to be paid by national government. And I think the financials, the figures would be presented by Pisang now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the question on the production cost of these IPP contracts, it depends on the type of contract that NTC entered into. Looking on the cost of the Luzon IPP contracts, it is in the amount of 20 pesos per kilowatt hour. And then if we compare this to the selling rate, which is only at 4 pesos. So that's the reason why there's a big stranded contract cost in Luzon
20 pesos per kilowatt hour.
on the average map. That's on the high end. It depends on the type of
And the
contract.
actual payment is less than
And the actual selling rate is only at the average 4 pesos per kilowatt hour. This is on the generation side. And if we look on the Visayas region, the average IPP cost is 3 pesos and 73 centavos compared to the selling rate of only 3 pesos and 58 centavos. So again, the stranded contract cost. And much more in the Mindanao because Mindanao has the lowest selling
Pag
rate.
wala yung 20 per kilowatt hour, magkano? I think that's related to the question now of Congresswoman Tuwa. Pag wala yun yung...
If we
Pag
out
wala yung
the,
IPP, how much will it be?
the production cost is below the selling
How much?
rate.
How much? Well, let's compare.
Sir, then it would depend on the kind of plant.
Well, let's go by average at least. We can use rule of thumb here.
If coal,
In the meantime, that they're looking, Madam Chair,
Can you also include in the data to what extent is energy supply also affected by these IPP contracts? Yes, Congressman
it's a
Mandanas.
point of clarification, Madam Chair, because the Madam Chair mentioned that my resolution is supposed to be an amendment in the law. Mine is actually to suspend or to discontinue charging or passing on universal charge to the consumer. Now, that's my question is a point of clarification, Madam Chair. The whole idea is, I think, the law authorizes the passing on of the universal charge to the consumer, right? But it does not prohibit suspending it or discontinuing it. So if it is just to suspend it, don't pass it on, then it does not require an amendment because we are not changing the law. We are not saying that they may not. So I was just pointing out whether a point of clarification, Madam Chair. I think the resolution, the sentiment of this committee, if it will be approved, is that is just to suspend or to discontinue immediately, okay, passing on the universal charge. Just the point. Is it, so the question, the point of clarification, Madam Chair, is that, is it a resolution, is it an amendment, or really could it be a resolution that we could act, the committee could act upon this morning, Madam Chair?
Can you address the questions, please, before we answer Congressman Mandana's question, clarifications?
Madam Chair, the data that we have here, looking at the production cost of the old plants, this is based on the historical number, it is only 3 pesos and 5 centavos per kilowatt hour.
Versus 20.
I would like to make some clarification on the 20 pesos per kilowatt hour that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but is that production or price?
This is the production cost per kilowatt hour.
No.
The 20 centavos that I mentioned earlier, the 20 pesos, this is on looking on the Malaya plant. These are using the expensive fuel cost. If we include the other IPP plants on the average, including the IPP plants that were already given to the administrator, the average for the Luzon is only at 6 pesos and 35 centavos per kilowatt hour. But again, that's very high compared to the old plants.
Madam Chair, I think we have enough information already to vote on my motion.
Madam Chair,
So yes, Congressman Casino.
if Congressman Golez would allow an amendment to this motion, may I propose that while the PISAM is renegotiating the contracts, that is, it suspend its petition for a 39 centavo increase, because if you're renegotiating the contracts, malamang magbabago din yung i-request ninyong figure from ERC. So it would be logical that in the meantime that these contracts are being renegotiated, that the application for an increase in the universal charge be suspended.
I accept the amendment, Madam Chair.
Yes, Yusek Aina.
Madam Chair, may we just be allowed to complete the presentation to show the timetable for the financial obligations that are that rests on PISAM at the moment, which actually depends on the universal charge for payment.
Yes, please. And can you
Before you present it, one quick question, Madam Chair. Yung very expensive yung Malaya plant, how many megawatts of electricity does it give our country? 600.
650 megawatts.
And this is the one that costs, that's at 20 pesos per kilowatt.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is a coal plant?
This is a bunker.
Bunker. Oh no, that's why it's...
let me just clarify where we are right now. There is a resolution after, there is a motion after a discussion, both on the petition of PISAM for stranded cost and stranded debt. And many of us in this committee looked at these petitions as unduly burdening the consumers. So after some discussion, there is a resolution that there is a motion that a resolution be made and passed by this committee to renegotiate the IPP contracts, and an amendment has been introduced to suspend as we are renegotiating the petition, the hearings on the petition of PISAM to ERC on these universal charges. That is where we are right now. Yusek Aina asked if we would allow them or PISAM to finish their presentation so that we may know what are the financial obligations that are attached and the timetable that are also attached to these financial obligations in lieu of the related to this petition.
Madam Chair, may I appeal that we already vote on my motion? I know that the Department of Energy will be showing some very substantial and very substantive figures, but I doubt whether it will affect the $10 billion predicament that we are facing. This is not even going to be worth $1 billion, Madam Chair. So anyway, this is not going to prejudice the situation of the Department of Energy. In fact, it will even strengthen them, because I'm sure that it is also their inner desire to renegotiate these onerous contracts. And with the legislative congressional support, that will strengthen their position, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, we have no objection to that. We just wanted to make sure that all data would be presented to the committee. But if it's the pleasure of the committee, then we will just submit the supporting documents.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Congressman Cabaluna and Congressman Bayoyo.
Just a point of clarification. The motion of Congressman Golez and Congressman Mandanas asking for the suspension of universal charge and to pass on the universal charge to the consumers. But we should remember that there are other components of the universal charge, not only stranded cost and stranded debts. There are missionary rectifications. And just to make clear what is the subject matter of the motion. It's only, the motion would only refer to stranded debts on stranded cost. It does not include missionary electrification. But if we have to include missionary electrification, then we might have a bigger problem on this with respect to isolated island electrification.
Madam Chair,
It doesn't include it.
I may clarify.
Different issue.
Congressman Golez, if I